our main focus here will be about the people of Earth and how our actions and who we are change the way that the world works. We're going to start with economics, and a lot of this slideshow will be economics, but when you think of economics, you think of money. It's kind of studying about money and how it works. But really, the definition of economics is the study of how people meet their wants and their needs. Okay, so there's a lot of things that you want and a lot of things that you need, and it's how do you get your hands on that. Now, for us, it's money, but it's possible that it could work in different ways. So really, that's the definition of economics. And when you're thinking about economics, there are three major economic questions that you need to be asking in order to really get the answers that you want. First off, what should be produced? So what kind of materials do we have available to make things, and what do people want? And that's how you answer the question of what you should make, what should you produce? And then how should it be produced? Do we use machines? Do we use people? Do we have a factory in China make them? How do we produce our goods or services? The last one is who uses the goods or services. So who is our customer? Who do we need to advertise to? Who do we need to get a hold of and make them know that we have this product available? Now, everything in the world is made up of these three things, and these three things are called the factors of production if you're in an economics class, but we'll just think of them as the thing that everything is made out of, okay? And so they are land, labor, and capital. Land is anything that is made by nature and used by us to make these different products that we make. Okay, so you can think of anything from wood, like we have right there on the top of the screen. Okay, it can be crops, the plants that we have around us. It can be animals. It can be the iron ore that we mine out of the ground. Anything that nature is providing for us. Now, the labor is the people that actually do the work. It's anyone that is working, so someone who's providing a service to you or making the products or even just pulling the logs, cutting down the trees or pulling the iron ore out of the ground or anything like that. Capital is really the one tricky one. Capital is human-made goods, so it's final products. People have used land and labor on them, but they're things that you use in order to make that final product. So some really good examples of capital are tools that you use to build something, machines that you're using to build something. So they are final products. Somebody made them, but you're using them to make other things. Okay. The other thing that is always capital and always counts as capital is building. So the actual factory that a person works in is capital. The storefront where people sell things, like the Walmart across the road, that is capital. That's considered capital. So everything in the world, if you put together land, labor, and capital, you can make anything that has been produced in the world. So we talked about economics being trying to meet our wants and our needs. Well, if you think about all the things that you need, really that's a pretty small list of things. You need air, you need water, you need food, and you need some sort of shelter, and clothes fits in that, anything to keep you warm and alive. Okay. However, your wants are very different. Your wants are unlimited. Even, a person who we think has everything wants more. So, I want an Xbox. I want TV. I want cable. I want a brand new car. I want a big house. I want all of these things are wants, wants, wants. Okay. And the thing about wants is humans have unlimited wants. No matter how much you have, you always want more. However, on this earth, we have limited resources. Okay. And so the major economic problem, if you ever hear what is the major economic problem, it's scarcity. Scarcity simply means we do not have enough stuff to make all the things that we want to have. Our earth literally doesn't have enough stuff. It doesn't have enough stuff to meet the wants of even one person, because one person has unlimited wants. They want everything, and they want 5 of everything, and they want 10 of everything. It just keeps getting bigger. Okay, and so because of scarcity, we have to make choices. Do we want to have a new car? Do we want to have a year's worth of groceries? They're about the same price, and so you have to make that decision. What do you want? Okay, and so every decision that we make on which one we want to have has an opportunity cost. And an opportunity cost is the cost of whatever you gave up, whatever the other thing you could have had when you select what you picked. So if we look at this graphic right here, I didn't explain it real well, but if we look at this graphic right here, if you select door A, then your opportunity cost is door B. You had to pick one, and so the opportunity cost is the one that you did not pick. That's what the one you picked costs. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of examples, and then you're going to write out your own example. First off, example of how it can work. It doesn't always have to be money or things. Sometimes it's time. Okay, maybe you really want to play video games. You love to play Call of Duty, but you have a big test tomorrow. Okay, and so you can choose, do I want 1 hour, do I want to spend my 1 hour studying that I have, or do I want to spend my 1 hour playing Call of Duty? You know, the benefits of studying are, you know, I might get that better grade tomorrow, I might get that payoff tomorrow. However, right now, it's kind of a negative because I'm going to be bored and not having fun and just, you know, trying to learn things. But the Call of Duty has the benefit of having fun right now, but the cost is maybe instead of an A on the test tomorrow, you get a C or something like that because you didn't study. All right, and so if you choose that 1 hour of studying because you've weighed all your options, okay, then your opportunity cost is you do not get to play Call of Duty for that hour. If you choose 1 hour of Call of Duty, your opportunity cost is you do not get to study for that hour. Okay? Because there's only so many hours in a day, and you have to choose what to do with your time. Now, let's do one with money. Like I said before, one new car, let's say it's like $12,000, all right, versus one whole year's worth of groceries. So if we average it all out, you can have a new car, maybe a used one, something like that, or you can have an entire year where your family is fed, okay? Well, you have to decide, what do I need, okay? At this point, do I have enough extra money that one car is what we really need? We need transportation, and we already have separate money that we can buy groceries with, okay? Or you decide, you know, I don't have that much money, and so I need to buy the groceries because we need to stay alive. That's a need, and the car is really just a want. And so you have to make that decision. But if you decide that I'm going to buy the new car, then what you're giving up is 1 year worth of groceries. If you decide I'm going to go ahead and stick with the groceries and do the safer bet, then your opportunity cost, what you're giving up, is one new car. So now you have to take some time and think up your own example of opportunity cost. Take some time to write out your answer on your write it out checkpoint number 1 on your notes. The next thing we're going to talk about, we're getting into almost college level economics, but I just want to really quickly look at the outside edge of it because it's really important to understand at least the basics of supply and demand so that you can understand why things cost the amount they do, because it's not like people are just randomly assigning prices to things. They have to account for supply and demand, and I'm going to show you why in this graphic. Okay, so supply is how much producers are willing to make. And so you can see that the blue line is marked as the supply line. Okay, and as you can see, as you go to the right and you are willing to produce more quantity, the price is going up. And so it's actually better to explain it the other way. As you're moving up, okay, so as you're moving up and the price is getting higher, the person who's making it, if at a high price, they're willing to make a whole lot more of it because they can make a whole lot more money for each thing. Okay. However, the demand is how much the consumers are willing to buy. How much of it and at what price are you willing to buy? So you can see when the price is really high, up at the top of the graph, that red line is pretty far to the left, so people aren't buying very much of it. Okay, but as you move to the or down and the price gets lower and lower, the red line moves further and further to the right, which means that people are willing to buy a lot more of it. Okay, you're way more likely to buy, let's say, Snickers bars. You're way more likely to buy Snickers bars if they're 1 penny than if they're $100. Okay, but Snickers, if they could sell them to you for $100, then they're going to sell a whole lot of them. But if they can only sell them for a penny, they might not even make them because they can't make any money off of that. Okay, so let's look at this graph and make sure that you take the time to fill out what each part of the graph is on the diagram that you have on the notes in front of you. So we said before, and I think you have like boxes like this, okay, but what like we said before, that blue line, the line going from the bottom left to the top right in your notes, is a supply line. And then the red line, the line moving from top left to bottom right in your notes, is called the demand line. Now, the axis is, the y-axis, which is this one, okay, the one going up and down, is your price. Okay, so as you move up, the price is going up. And then the x-axis, the one going side to side, is going to be your quantity, how much people are willing to buy or produce. Okay, and so we've got our price, we've got our quantity, completely ready to go. All right, now the people that produce the goods do have to set the price at some point. And so if you're a supplier, why wouldn't you set the price really high and then people just have to pay that for your goods? Well, remember, people aren't going to want it if it's overpriced. You're not going to buy a Snickers bar for $100. So let's look at what happens, and I'll draw some lines here. Let's go with purple for the first one. Okay, if that producer decides, oh, we're going to charge a bunch of money, $100 for that Snicker bar, right? And so there's that $100 mark. Okay, well, at this point, the supply, we got to come down, straight down, and see how much is there. Okay, and this right here, the purple star, is the amount that they're going to make. Okay, the amount that they're going to make. And so let's say it's, again, $100. Whoops. And they're going to make 100 of them. Okay, so they're going to make 100 of them at $100. And then the problem is the demand curve, or the amount that people will actually buy, is way over here at this purple star. Okay, so that's one. Well, people are only one crazy person is going to buy a Snickers bar for $100. And so we've got one person is buying them, and they made, because they wanted to sell, 100 of them. Okay, well, that's a big problem, right? You just spent all that money to make 100 different Snickers bars, and you only sold one. So you've got 99 just sitting there on the shelf getting old, and eventually, since it's a food product, they're going to spoil and you're going to lose all that money. So that was a big mistake, right? You have what is called this difference between 1 and 100 is called a surplus. You have too much of something, okay, which eventually will go bad, and you wasted all that money making it. Okay, so now let's look at the next option. And the next option is that they screwed up, and we can do this one in green just to make it different. They screwed up and made it way too cheap. Okay, and so this is like the thing costs a penny or 5 cents or something like that. Snickers bar is 5 cents. Okay, so let's put 5 cents here. Okay, well, of course, it costs 5 cents or 6 cents to make them. So Snickers isn't going to make very many of them. Snickers is only going to make like one of them at 5 cents to try and sell. Okay, but if you go down here, people are going to demand, because that's the red curve, people are going to want to buy like 100 of them. All right, and so now at 5 cents, you realize I only have one, but people want to buy 100, so I'm losing all of this business that I could be having because the shelves are empty. Okay, and so that's kind of that's a big problem too, because now all of a sudden, well, these Snickers bars are really cheap, but there's never any out there, so they're just, it's just a fake price. But so what do you need to do? Either way, if you're up high and you have a surplus, or you're down too low on your price and you have a shortage, you want to adjust the price so that you're willing to make the exact same amount that people are willing to buy. And so if we get rid of this, we find that, $1 is that perfect price. Okay, and that would be the equilibrium price. Okay, and so if we go across, we find that there it is, and that is $1. It's at the equilibrium where the supply curve and the demand curve touch each other. Okay, at this point where the amount that the people are, or that Snickers is willing to make is 50. The amount that people are willing to buy is 50. So they made 50 of them thinking we'll sell those, we'll be happy, we'll get all the profit that we want, everything will be great. And the customers wanted exactly 50 of them, so everybody that wanted a Snickers bar got to buy a Snickers bar. So the customers are happy and the company maximizes their profit at equilibrium. Not only do they want to guess equilibrium right, but the prices will change if you're off of equilibrium, if you have a shortage or a supply, and they will automatically change and correct, and they'll move back to that equilibrium point. And so that's really the basics of supply and demand. Now, supply and demand will get way more confusing when you're on your first year in college, but we'll leave that until then. As long as you understand this, you get how a market works, and that really it's kind of hard to overprice or underprice something because it's always going to move to that correct price. Now we have to spend some more time defining more economic terms, and the economic term that we're going to look at is market. A market is a pretty simple term to understand. It's just an organized way for producers and consumers to come together. So it's an organized way for the person who's trying to sell something to come together with the people that are trying to buy things, right? And it can be, online, it can be a market like the picture that you see down to the right, it can be a Walmart, it can be anything, right? But it's just an organized way for that to happen. Now, through history, it's changed, okay? It used to be a barter system. A barter system it's a fancy word really for trading what you have to give. And so the example that I like to give is I am a house painter, okay, and Abdirahman is a chicken farmer. All right, so he has some chickens, and I need some meat for dinner tonight, so I need to get my hands on a chicken. And so I go up to Abdirahman and say, I am an excellent house painter, and I would love to have some of your chickens. And so I will paint your house for 10 chickens. And Abdirahman says, well, I do have extra chickens, and I would love to sell them, but I don't need my house painted. What I really need is a new pair of Jordans. Okay, and I say, well, I don't have any Jordans. And so at that point, the transaction falls apart. I can't get his chickens. He doesn't get his Jordans. I don't get nobody gets their house painted. It just doesn't work. So the tricky part about trade or barter is you have to find somebody that has what you want and wants what you have. So I have to find a chicken farmer that needs their house painted. Otherwise, the transaction's not going to go through. It's not going to work. All right. And so we've evolved into what we call a cash market now. And a cash market means, and you understand it because you've been living in it your whole life, but a cash market means that I go out, since I'm a house painter, I find somebody who needs their house painted, and they give me this paper money, okay, or coins or whatever it is, depending on where you live. But they give me some money for doing that has some value, all right? And then I take that money over to Abdirahman, and I say, okay, now I'd like to buy 10 of your chickens for, however many dollars, whatever amount of money it is. And then I buy his chickens and I give him the money that I made. Okay, and then he goes out and he finds somebody who has the Jordans and he gives them the money and he gets the Jordans. So now, because we have this value, this thing with basically a made up value, this I don't even know how to explain it. You know, it's coins, it's paper, whatever it is, but we've given it value. Now you don't have to find someone that needs what you have and wants or needs what you have and you need what they have. Instead, you just need to fill one of those two sides and then you can have that valuable thing called money. All right. And if you have any questions about this, it's something you can ask about in class because I feel like it's a really hard thing to explain, but it's something you probably understand because it's the way you've been living your whole life. Now, specialization is another very important thing, and it's kind of separate from the market. But specialization makes you more profitable. It gets you more money. Okay, and what specialization is you do one thing. You make one product. Okay, and so it's kind of the way the world works, right? We have bakers, we have auto mechanics, we have all these things. We don't have one person that does all of those things. And the reason for that is because if you bake and you bake every single day, then you become really good at it and you become really fast at it. And so it's a very fast thing. You're moving through it and you can make a whole bunch of goods in a short period of time, so it costs less to make those goods, and you're probably making better stuff than the person that's trying to do absolutely everything. Okay, so if you can make one good really, really well, then you can make it cheaper and you can make it higher quality. And so you actually can charge less money for it than someone who's really new at it and not very good at it. And so if you're specialized, then you can charge less money, you get more business, and people get it cheaper. So specialization increases profit for you and makes the world better for everybody else too. The other thing that keeps prices down and quality up is competition, because if you have a lot of different people competing and doing the same thing, then they have to keep making their products either cheaper than the other guy to get more business or better than the other guy so that people will buy their products. Okay, so they have to find an edge, they have to find a way to make their product better or cheaper than anybody else, which helps the consumer and keeps the prices down. All labor, so every job, is broken up into different economic sectors. And so we're going to look at what they are real quick, and I'll give you a couple of examples. The first one is the primary sector, and the primary sector is anybody who's going out and grabbing something that the earth makes. So you're collecting the resources from nature. Some examples of this is a farmer. You're going out, the earth is making plants, you're harvesting them and making them into something that people can eat. Okay, it's also a fisherman, right? The earth is creating these animals and you're catching them and selling them off. All right, or a logger, a lumberjack, someone who cuts down trees. Any of these people that actually grab something that the earth makes, and that's your only job, you are in the primary sector. The secondary sector is anybody that uses those resources that the primary sector grabs from the earth and makes it into something. So you're making some new product. Okay, so a factory worker would be somebody who gets these raw materials and makes it into something that you would buy. Okay. Another good example, especially with the farmer example being a primary sector, is a baker. So if that farmer's in the primary sector and they're grabbing the grains and stuff like that that makes the flour, then what the baker's doing is taking that flour and sugar and everything like that, combining it in a special way and making a cake for people to buy. So a secondary sector is anybody who uses a bunch of different stuff that was pulled from the earth by the primary sector and makes new stuff, finished products that people buy. The tertiary sector is where most people work in America. And the tertiary sector, you provide services to people and secondary industries. Okay, so the big thing, the big part of tertiary sector is that you're providing services. So yeah, you might be providing services to people, you might be providing services to other companies. That's the secondary industries part of this definition. Okay, but some people that provide services, you just have to think of anybody who you pay to do something for you and you do not get something that you can hold in your hands out of it. Okay, so a lawyer, all right, they're doing you're paying them to defend you in court, but you don't actually get something that you can hold in your hands. At the end of the time, you've given them money and they've just given you service, right? Nothing else. Okay. A doctor, same thing. You're paying them, you're giving them money, and you're not getting anything out of it besides your health, right? They're performing a service. They're doing something to you, not giving something to you for that money. An auto mechanic is the same thing, somebody who fixes your car. Also, taxi or a bus driver, same exact thing. You go in, you pay the taxi company, you pay the bus company, you pay the taxi driver, and you don't, at the end of the ride, you got from one place to another, but you didn't get anything out of it. Okay, so services. Tertiary sector is services. The quaternary sector is kind of the most confusing one, and it is focused on information. Okay, and so anything that, it's not even really about getting or doing something for you. It's about getting information to you or using information that you're creating and trying to create new ideas. Okay, so the two that fit really, really well into the quaternary sector are teachers and politicians. Okay, so the teacher is a person who's taking all this information and distilling it down and trying to get it to you and get it into your head. So it's a service that we're providing, but it's a service that's just about getting information to you in the best way possible for you to learn. Politicians are taking the information, your ideas, your thoughts, all that kind of stuff, and they are turning it into laws. Okay, new ideas, new thoughts, right? And so those are the economic sectors of all different jobs. Okay, there are a number of different types of economies, and again, we'll really quickly go through them, but traditional economies are based on customs and habits. So how has it always worked since the beginning? How have we always done things? So a traditional economy might be something like, well, the women stay in the village and they do the farming and they make the items and things like that, whereas the men go out and they hunt and gather and get the food. Okay, and usually a traditional economy, or an economy that is more traditional than anything else, is a subsistence economy. Now, subsistence means you are only making enough to survive. You're not out to try and make money. You're not out to try and get rich. You're just trying to get from day to day to day and survive. Okay. Now, the next couple are different types of economies. So the market economy is where all individuals make decisions. Market economy is a lot like the United States. Okay, so you get to decide what you want to buy, and the companies get to decide what they want to make. Okay, so you get to decide what your job is, and you also get to decide what you do with your own money. Okay, and so how is the price determined? How do we know how much it is? Remember, supply and demand. If those companies make it in the wrong area, it's going to naturally want to move back to the right spot where you don't have a shortage or a supply, or sorry, a shortage or a surplus. Okay, now command economies are a whole different thing. Command economies are where the government makes every single decision. So they make the price of everything, they give the jobs, they do all that kind of stuff. The problem with this economy very often is that the government is not necessarily an expert, and they don't really know every person's preferences on what their job's going to be, on what product they like more than other products. So it's one person making decisions for a whole lot of people, or a small group of people making decisions for a whole lot of people. And so command economies have a tendency to not work super well. But really, every economy in the world is a mixed economy. It's some combination. Every single economy has a little bit of market, a little bit of command, a little bit of tradition. It has everything in it. Okay, so most economies are just more market or more command or more traditional, but every single one of them is mixed. Okay. And so, for example, in the USA, we have a market economy, right? You get to decide what you want to do, or what you want to buy, and the producers get to decide what they're going to make and how much they're going to charge you for it. Okay. However, The government puts on regulations and subsidies. Okay, so regulations, they say that meat cannot be sold if it is not of a certain quality, and they inspect the meat and they make sure that it's good enough quality that people should be eating it and it's not going to make you sick or anything like that. Okay, and so those regulations, those extra steps that the butchers and people that make the meat have to do, that costs extra money. Okay, and so meat costs more than it would if you just didn't even watch over it. However, it's a better quality, so you have to do that trade-off. It's, you know, the government is boosting up the price a little bit, okay, but it's for our own health and our own safety. Okay. Another example is North Korea. North Korea is almost completely a command economy. They decide what your job's going to be. They decide what you can do. They decide what the prices are. They decide all of these different things. However, when you walk into the grocery store, there might be two options, right? For cookies, let's say you want to go get cookies. There might be Chips Ahoy and Oreos. Okay. Well, you still get to make that decision with your money that they've given you. You get to make the decision, do I want to buy Chips Ahoy or do I want to buy Oreos? Do I want to buy chocolate chip cookies? Do I want to buy oatmeal raisin cookies? Those are still decisions that you get to make. So there's still a little bit of market economy, even in North Korea, which is one of the most command economies in the world. Now we'll talk about economic development and how your country develops economically to become a stronger economy. And so really, economic development is just growing your economy and making life better for the people in your country. Okay, and there are two different categories, developed and developing. Developed means you're a strong economy, you have a high standard of living, it's a good place to live. Only about 20% of all the countries in the world are considered developed economies. Okay, economies that are usually old, that have been around for a while and very big, like the USA is a developed economy, Japan is a developed economy, whereas a developing economy are these, you know, that are just not quite there yet. Okay, some of them are really, really low and struggling to survive. Some of them, it's just the economy's not quite big enough to be counted as developed. And so there's less productive economies. Some people have lower standards of living. It's harder to live there. It's just not as good a place to be. Okay? And some examples of that would be like Haiti, the island in the Caribbean, and Ethiopia and Africa. A bunch of different African nations would fit into this developing country. Okay? And the way that we measure it is by using GDP. Now, GDP, and you'll write this in, I think, a fill-in-the-blank sentence, is gross domestic product. Okay, gross domestic product. And that means everything, absolutely everything, that your country produces. Gross means everything, not even adjusted for anything. And then domestic is inside your country, and product is the stuff that you're making. And so it's the value of every single good and service in your country produced in a year. Okay. And so there is a calculation to this to figure out what it is. Okay, and what it is y, which is GDP, y equals GDP, is equal to C plus I plus G plus parentheses X minus M. Okay, now the C right here, the C is going to be everything that customers buy in America is the C. The I is every dollar that businesses spend. So C is every dollar that people spend. I is every dollar that businesses spend. G is every dollar that governments spend. So now we've got what everybody spends in all of America. All the money spent in America is added up. Okay. But you also have to add the areas of, or where the stuff that we buy from other countries and the stuff that we sell to other countries. And so it's exports minus imports. Exports are the things we sell to other countries, all the money from the things we sell to other countries, minus all the money that we spend buying things from other countries. So you have to figure all the stuff you sell to other countries you're making, but all the stuff you're buying from other countries you are not making. And so you have to take that out of it. So C plus I plus G plus X minus M is just the value, the total dollar amount of all the goods and services produced in 1 year in your country. So how do we make these developing nations into developed nations? How do we fix them? What do we do to build an economy? And there's really two different things we need to do. And the second one really just helps with the first one. So all we're trying to do is this first one, increase productivity, make ourselves better at our jobs. Okay. And so what you want to do is try and make one person, be able to make more of their goods or services, do more of what they're supposed to do, okay, or do it better. Right. And so when the other good thing about this is when you can make more stuff. So if you're making peanut butter sandwiches and you make 5 a day and you get much better at it, you make 10 a day, now your company is making way more money off of those peanut butter sandwiches, and so they can afford to pay you more. So it's really good for absolutely everybody. And so the way that we increase productivity is through a lot of different things, but training and education are the big ways to make someone more productive. Okay, you train them better in what they're supposed to do, and they go to college to learn all about whatever it is that you're doing. So becoming a teacher, we have all these trainings because we want to be better and more efficient at it. Okay, and so I have a little joke here, but it's, they found a perfect way to increase productivity in the company. They just hooked the toilet right up at the desk. It's kind of gross, kind of funny, but that's what it is. So improving technology is another way to increase productivity, because if you make your machines better, if you make your computer programs better, if you make everything better, then you're going to be better at your job because you have better tools to use to complete your job. Take some time to do your checkpoint and write it out on your notes under write it out number 2. We all know what trading is. You're giving one thing to get another thing. But even if it includes money, like we talked about before in a cash market, it's still called trade. Trade is just any exchange of goods and services in a market. Whether you're using money or not, you're always trading. Okay, and there are 3 different types of trade. First off is domestic trade. Domestic trade is all of it happens in a country. So it's made in that country, made in the USA, and bought in the USA, then it's domestic trade for the USA. Exports are anything that is made in the USA or made in your home country and sent to another country and you get paid for it. Imports are anything that are made in another country and we have them shipped in and sold in this country. So an example of an export would be a made in America t-shirt that is sold in Europe and England. Okay, an example of an import would be a Toyota that was made in Japan, Toyota car, that we buy, that an American buys here. Now, free trade is one of the things that I think is really, really, really important. Really important that we understand that it's a good thing and everything like that. But the reason that I think it's important is because the countries around the world have not really thought about it very well, and they have put up trade barriers. So things that stop the trade between 2 countries. And the whole idea of trade barriers is to try and protect your own businesses in your own country. But really what it ends up doing is it ends up making everybody a little bit worse off. Okay, and so let's talk about some of these trade barriers. There's a lot of different trade barriers, but these are kind of the 2 big ones that are used most often, and so I want to explain what they are. But a tariff is simply a tax on imports. So if it's a tax on imports, that means that, that it is a certain percentage of money that needs to be added or paid in taxes to our government when you try to sell something here in America. All right, and so if it might be a 3% tax, and let's say it's a $100 item. So we have a brand new pair of shoes that's shipped in from China, and we add a 3% tax onto it. Okay, well that means that $100 shoes, they have to pay $3, which is 3% of 100. Okay, they have to pay $3 to the U.S. government. Which, what are they going to do with that then? they're going to increase the price of the good. They're going to make the consumer pay that extra money. Okay, so a tax on imports, the whole idea is to make their shoes $103, and then maybe American shoes that used to be $101 are now the cheaper shoes instead of the more expensive shoes. So a tariff, the idea is to tax imports, to charge them money. Now, a quota is a different thing. A quota is a limit on the number of imports. Okay, so if I say that we have, like, or we're having Toyota cars shipped in from Japan, all right, we're going to put a quota of 100,000 Toyota cars shipped in from Japan. And so as soon as those, or that is reached, as soon as 100,000 cars from Japan get brought in from Japan, then if another even single car they try and ship in, the U.S. government says, no, you can't bring any more, and you've hit your quota, you've hit your limit on the number that we're going to allow into the country for this year. Now, free trade, if you take away all the trade barriers, benefits all the countries involved, because if it doesn't make you richer to trade, if it doesn't make you happier, if it doesn't make you better, then you're not going to do it. You're not going to trade if it doesn't help you out in some way. Okay, and we'll look at that with a little experiment that we're going to do in class and see if that's true. Now, one of the big free trade agreements that we have is NAFTA, and NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement, and so all three North American countries have taken away most of their trade barriers, most of their limits. Okay, and so that is between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Now, some of you are going to be happy and some of you are going to be sad, but we are finally done with economics. I personally love it. It's my favorite thing, but some people aren't so interested in it. So let's move into a different area, and we're going to move into the population. In the world, it's approximately about 7 billion people that live on the earth today. Now, before farming started 12,000 years ago, there were less than 10 million. So this increase has been huge. It's been a gigantic increase. And it's increased because with farming, we've been able to have this new technology, which allows one person to feed thousands of people at a time, because they're on this big farm making tons and tons of crops and animals and things like that. Okay, so that allows more people to live on this earth because it takes fewer people to get the food for those people. All right, and so the next thing we're going to look at is the demography, or look at demography, and demography is just a name for the study of human populations. So you're all constantly studying, what is the population at, how is it changing, and why is it changing. All right, so demography is a study of human populations. And then the other thing we're going to look at is the birth rate and the death rate. Okay, and I used to have these as separate things on a slide, but it seems unnecessary because they're basically the same thing. You just put one different word in there. Okay, the birth rate is the number of births per 1,000 people. Okay, number of births per 1,000 people. So the number of people born on average per 1,000 people in a year. Okay, and the death rate, get this, I know, pretty sneaky, I'm sure none of you can guess, is the number of deaths per person, per 1,000 people in a year, okay, on the earth. So if you count every 1,000 people, if out of every 1,000 people, 30 of them die every year, then the death rate would be 3%, because you take that 30, divide it by 1,000, and you get your 3%. And the population is growing right now, and it's growing because of a few different things, and it's also affecting our Earth in many different ways. So the causes, the reasons, the big one is we're just living longer. Okay, people are just living longer than they used to, right? And the reason that people are living longer than they used to is because there's better medical care. Okay, people are able to the doctors have all of these different technologies, brand new machines, all that kind of stuff that's keeping people alive longer. One of them that I always like to bring up, the biggest thing that made the biggest change in mortality rates and the amount of deaths in hospitals is the doctors used to do the autopsies too. So they would go down, they'd have their hands in the dead people, checking out, seeing how they died, and then they'd go upstairs and they'd perform surgery on you. And what they'd skip is the hand washing part, right? They didn't realize that was important. And so the dead, cells and things like that would get into you and it would cause you to die. All right. And so that would happen every now and again and they couldn't figure it out. And then way back in a long time ago, they said, well, we need to wash before a surgery, after a surgery, every time we walk in and out of the room, we need to completely wash and sterilize everything. It needs to be a completely clean environment. Otherwise, these people are going to be infected. And that brought down the death rate by a ton. So simple little things all the way up to these huge machines have made our medical care so much better. Okay, we're also better at food production. One farmer can make much more through all the technology, tractors, GMOs, things like that. You can make way more food than you used to be able to, and better food. And then we also have better living conditions. So it's easier to live now than it was to live thousands of years ago because we have all these new materials. We have, brick and mortar houses, wooden houses, instead of living in maybe teepees, maybe tents, maybe out in the open, different things depending on what time period you're living in. All right. Now, the effects that it's had, though, this huge population boom, all these people, is that it's really kind of destroying our Earth. And one of the things is our Earth can't really provide for as many people as we're adding to it. And at some point, we're going to hit a point where there's not enough clean water or food for all the people if the population grows as quick as it is. And some people are going to starve, and some people are going to go without clean water, and already people are going without clean water, and so it's a really big issue. Now, the other two things are things that we're doing to our Earth. We are polluting it, we're adding filth, we're adding byproducts into the Earth, and destroying the clean water and the potential to make food that we already have. Okay. And then we're also just taking way too many natural resources, which we've talked about on previous slides. And as people increase, we're only going to end up taking more natural resources. And the Earth simply cannot keep up making the natural resources that we need to survive. Population distribution is simply how are the people spread out around the Earth. Okay, and we have these wonderful population density maps that are going to show us exactly how they're spread out. And it's really a nice way of seeing where most people live. Okay, and the reason people live where they do, the reason they're spread out in the way that they are, is because you live close to whatever makes life easy. Good soil so you can grow food, good water, or fresh water so that you can drink and stay alive, mild, decent climate so you're not freezing to death or, getting dehydrated in a short period of time because it's too hot. Okay, and so people used to live basically right next to all of these things. Now, the Industrial Revolution did allow us to have cities in new places because now instead of animal-powered things, we have new machines. And so, air conditioning allows you to live in colder places, and hotter places, and heat allows you to live in colder places. And if you're far away from fresh water, we have all this technology that can move the water from one place to another. All right, so the Industrial Revolution, with the new methods of transport and the new methods of changing the environment, have allowed us to live in new places. But still, we're basically by the things that we need to live that make life easy. Okay, and so population density is simply the number of people per square mile. So it would probably, a really high number would be like 500 people in a square mile. That's a 1 mile by 1 mile chunk of land. How many people live there? Okay, and so that's what they figure out to make these maps like the one that we're seeing right here. Okay, and so we need to look at it and see that you can make some decisions about why people live the places that they live. If I take the purple one and I draw in the tropics, right? draw in the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, then you see there's a lot more people there's, a lot more population zones that are in these temperate climates. Okay, in these temperate climates, which means the weather is not too hot, not too cold. It's kind of where you want to be. Okay, so a lot of people live in those areas because of that. Now, if I erase all that ink and I look at green, a ton of people. Look at how, with red being more people and yellow being less people, you can see how the entire edge of a lot of these continents are populated and the middle are not. So you got the edge, close to water, right? You're close to the ocean. So this is way more populated than this region, right? Okay, this edge is way more populated than the rest of Asia. Look, this part of Asia has like hardly anybody living in it. Okay, and that's because you're closer to water. Even if we look at Africa, close to water, close to water. Okay, this is where the heavy population centers are. Okay, and so people live near what makes life easier. Migration is how people move from one place to another, and when we're talking about one place to another, we're really talking about one country to another. And so there are two different types of migration: emigration with an E and immigration with an I. Okay, and if you emigrate, then you are an immigrant. And if you immigrate, you are an immigrant. Okay, and so if we think about it, emigrating, well, if we look at the definition, then we think about it, emigrating is leaving your home country, and immigrating is coming into a new place. And so just like exports and imports, we can look at that first letter and it'll help us remember which is which. E is for exit, you're exiting the country, and I is for coming in to the country. Okay, so you're exiting the country or you're coming into the country. And so if you, like this picture shows down here, if you are leaving the USA and moving to France, then you are an emigrant with an E from the USA, and you are an immigrant to France. You are emigrating from the USA and immigrating to France. Take the time to write it out for checkpoint, write it out number 3. You can read the definitions on the push and pull factors in involuntary migration, but I just want to give you some examples. Some examples of push factors would be things like war or famine, people starving to death in your country make you want to leave, or persecution. Someone doesn't like your religion or your culture or something like that, so they're doing bad things to you. Those would all make you want to leave your country. Pull factors, some examples would be a big supply of jobs. If you know there's a lot of jobs out there, you're going to want to go to that country. Or freedom from that persecution. You're just getting away from the other things and going into a place where people will accept you. Okay, involuntary migration, there's a couple of different ways that we've really seen it happen throughout history, but a lot of times it's slavery, but also some of you could have been involuntary migrants, because if you are a child and you love where you're living, but your parents move, you're probably going to have to move with them. And so you are migrating, you are moving involuntarily, not of your own choice. I find this concept to be another one that my students have a lot more difficulty than I do, because most of you have only lived in an urban environment, and I've lived in both. Okay, but there are two different types of environments: a rural and an urban setting. And rural is settlements, or you're living out away from a city. So you're out in the country. You're just away. You're not inside of a major city. Okay, I lived in a town of 700 people where the closest Walmart, the closest McDonald's was like 22 miles away. That's the country. You're not in a city. Whereas urban is where all of us live now, me and all of you. Okay, you're within a city. Okay, so rural is out in the country, outside of a city. Urban is in a city. Now, urbanization has been happening throughout history, and it continues to happen. We continue to move away from rural areas and into urban areas. As the agricultural revolution happened, we realized that we don't have to live out where there's lots of animals and lots of plants and stuff like that, because farmers can make that food and they can ship it into the cities and we can buy it. Okay, and so it's become a lot easier to live in cities, and that's where most of the jobs are, because most of our jobs are service or tertiary jobs nowadays, and so people have to move to those urban areas to make a living. Okay, now there's problems with urbanization as more people move into the cities. There are poor and overcrowded neighborhoods with high crime, and one of the words that we use to call them, or that we call them, are slums. Okay, so slums are these places where there's just way too many people packed in. They don't have very much money. They don't have ways of making money, and so it ends up being a crime-heavy neighborhood as well. Okay, now the other issue that we have is a little bit different. It's suburban sprawl. Because there are slums and because the inner city has a tendency to have these high crime rates and stuff like that, people want to move away from the city. And everybody has a car around here. Most people have a car, and so people tend to live in suburbs. But then the suburbs get packed, and then you have to move out further and make suburbs further out and further out and further out. For example, I live in a suburb in Wisconsin, so I'm even in a different state, but I'm still a suburb of this city. It keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what you're doing is you're taking up the natural land. You're taking up the land where nature can provide what people need to survive. Take the time to read this slide about what culture is. I don't know why that disappeared, but I'll write it up here real quick. Culture. Culture is all of these things here, but as you're reading it, and reading about these different traits and norms, just understand that what makes up your culture are the addition of all of these cultural traits plus more that I couldn't have possibly put all of them on a slide, plus the norms, which the norms are just things that you see as a normal thing happening in your culture, whereas other people might not see it as so normal. Again, some of my headings are disappearing, so I'll go ahead and write this one in. It is religion, and religion is simply a system of worship and belief. We all know what religions are. All religions have different tenets, and some of them have the same tenets, and we'll talk about different religions throughout the class this year, but the top three in numbers are Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. A lot of people are surprised that see that Judaism is not on here. Jewish people are not on here, but they're really not one of the larger ones in the world. Okay, for example, the biggest religion is Christianity. It is at 2.07 billion people or identify themselves as Christians. 1.25 billion identified themselves as Muslims. Islam is one of these huge religions, and it's the fastest growing religion of all of these. Okay. Now, the Hinduism is the next one at 837 million, and then you even have one more before Judaism. You have Sikhism at 25 million, then Judaism is about 14 million people in the entire world. So a lot of people are surprised by that because we talk a lot about Judaism and Jewish people because they have that power, but we oftentimes don't think about the Hindus and the Sikhs as being up that high. Cultural diffusion is taking your cultural traits and norms and them spreading out from one place to another. Okay, and this can happen for a lot of different reasons. It can happen because of colonization, because one group of people goes in and takes over another area like we talked about before. It can happen because of trade, because if you're sitting there trying to sell your things to someone in another country, then you're not just going to sit there and talk about that. You might talk about your life and how things work in your country, and those ideas get spread all around the world. It can happen through missionaries. Missionaries are people that go around the world trying to spread their faith, trying to convert people to their religion. And so the religions can change because of that. Technology can change it because now with the internet, I can hear or even see videos of things and how things work in other countries. Anytime I want, I can go onto YouTube and find these videos and see different ideas and different thoughts. And then also transportation. Transportation has boomed into this thing where it used to take months to get from England to the US across that pretty small ocean, and now within a day we can be to the entire other side of the earth with airplanes, and even faster with some jets. Okay, so all of these things are allowing culture to spread out, and good examples of cultural diffusion are right here in Saudi Arabia. There's a McDonald's. Okay, McDonald's sitting in Saudi Arabia. That is an American company. That's American food being served in Saudi Arabia. Okay, that piece of our culture has moved over to there. And then this one right here is a picture I took of a sign on Snelling Avenue. Okay, so it's in America, however, there's a Chinese restaurant where they're selling Chinese food. Okay, so I took the two food examples, but these cultural traits spreading from one place to another can happen for in a lot of different ways. One of the bigger parts of our culture that a lot of you are interested in is NFL, pro football. Okay, well, every year now they have a game over in London. That culture is spreading over there. Okay, some of you people are into One Direction, right? One Direction, well, they're not really around anymore, but they're a band that got really, really big here in America, and they started over in the United Kingdom. Okay, and so kind of interesting to look at how not only how culture spreads, but some examples of cultural diffusion. So make sure you can come up with examples of them, and we'll talk about it in class.